Hey guys, my name is Ashley. What is up? Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a book review on Seasons of the Storm by Elle Cosimano. So I'm going to begin this video by stating that there will be spoilers later on, but I will let you know when we get to that point. But for right now, here is some non-spoilery stuff. So I received Seasons of the Storm in my June bookish box. It was the selected book for the month of June. It is a YA fantasy about these four main characters who have all died, and before they died, a woman appeared to them and gave them the option of either dying permanently or working for her, and if they agreed to work for her, they would become an embodiment of a season. So the premise of the story is that we have four main characters that we follow along with. There's Jack, who is winter, Fleur, who is spring, Julio, who is summer, and Amber, who is fall. So what happens in the story is that each season is essentially supposed to kill the one that comes before it. So for example, winter has to kill fall, spring has to kill winter, and summer has to kill spring in order for like that season to take over. And once the season is killed, their like spirit is taken to the underground facility where all of the seasons recover when they're not currently like in season. So when winter isn't happening anymore, Jack is taken back underground to his dorm room, and where he like sits in a stasis chamber, they call it, for like however many days, so his body can recover. And then he trains and prepares to kill Amber when fall is in season again. So that repeats as a cycle, so on and so forth. And basically what the conflict is in the story is that Jack is in love with Fleur, who is spring, and he no longer wants to continue the cycle of having to be killed and then waiting around to train again, and then he gets his season and then he gets killed, and it just keeps going on and on and on. He doesn't want to do that anymore. He wants to be with Fleur, he wants to run away with her. If he tries to escape, then Kronos, who is Father Time, who basically controls the whole underground facility, will go after them. Another important thing to note is that each season has like a scoreboard basically where they're ranked based off of how long it takes them to kill the opposing season, and like how long their season lasts. So like if spring lasts a long time and is able to like evade summer from coming in and killing them off, then the their scores go up. But if they don't last a long time and it takes them forever to kill their opposing season, then they start to fall below the ranks. And if you fall super below the ranks, you get terminated, which means that you're basically you're completely dead. So Fleur, because she is in love with Jack, she doesn't want to kill him quickly, and she doesn't like to fight the opposing seasons. So she doesn't like to kill Jack, and then she kind of just lets Julio take her out as soon as he's ready. So she's in danger of slipping below the line. So that's another thing that prompts Jack to be I need to get out of here. She's in danger of being terminated, and I don't want that to happen to her. And again, he's sick of just having to live by the rules. So they basically, the four seasons come together and hatch an escape plan. So that's the gist of the story. To be honest, it was not my cup of tea. This book, I had different expectations going in, and I'm going to delve a little bit deeper once I get to the spoilery section, but just know in this non-spoiler section, that's the whole premise of the story, and for me, it wasn't my cup of tea. It's not necessarily a bad story. I think that Elle Cosimano has beautifully written prose. I think she's a very talented writer. I think the concept was very, very different and not something that has been played around with in YA novels. So I definitely do think that there are some positives of the story. You can tell that she put in a lot of hard work creating the concepts, but just for me personally, it wasn't my favorite book I've ever read. So without further ado, we're going to jump into the spoilery section of the book. So if you want to keep watching, go for it. If not, and you want to read the story for yourself, then read the story and come back and check it out. So like I said, the story was not my cup of tea, and I'm about to explain why. So first of all, I was under like the expectation that these 4 seasons all coexisted on an island somewhere. I didn't know Gaia was a character. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. Gaia, who's like the, she's like planet Earth. She's, Mother Earth, Mother Nature, whatever, who runs like the underground facility, and then Father Time is her father, Kronos is her dad, and they're like at odds with each other. But anyway, I thought Gaia was like, I thought it was like an island or something, and I was like under the expectation that these 4 seasons were like on this island somewhere where they were like given the opportunity to live as long as they were the seasons on this island or in this fantasy world. And then the conflict takes place when everything's balanced, but then Fleur and Jack decide that they're in love with each other, or they fall in love with each other, and it like ruins things for Amber and Julio, who are summer and fall. So I was like under the impression that that was like the gist of the story. It was kind of like giving me Hunger Game vibes, that they had to like fight and survive on this island, and then like 2 fall in love, and then like the other 2 have to figure out how to, make the balance continue. So that was kind of like my impression just based off of reading the premise. And I was like, ooh, I've never heard of a story where, someone dies and then instead of dying, they get to live, but they have to live as a season. That's a really intriguing concept. It's something that I don't think ever has been done before. So I was really excited to, read about this story. So some of the problems I had, other than like the fact that that's not the case, what actually ends up happening is that there's a whole slew of like teenagers who have died and become reincarnated as seasons, and they live in a dormitory underground in like the real world. So everything that happens in the story actually takes place, other than like the dormitory or they call it the observatory or whatever, where they live underground, and that's where they train, that's where they rest when they're in stasis, that's where they recharge. Other than that being like made up, everything takes place in the real world. Like there's a setting in San Diego, in Mexico, in Washington, D.C., in Virginia, in the Appalachians, like, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but for me, it wasn't as like much of a fantasy in terms of setting, which is fine. If it's executed well, then having like fantastical elements take place in the real world is great. Obviously Harry Potter, half of, the book series takes place in London, and the other half takes place in like this, other realm, if so, that humans can't see, or which non-witches and wizards can't see, or can't access. And that's executed really well, because we do get those real world elements, and then like that aspect of fantasy. But unfortunately in this story, it felt weird. I didn't really care for the characters all that much. Like Jack and Fleur, first of all, so the novel was in both of their perspectives. So there was, some perspectives of Jack, some perspective of Fleur. They switched on and off. Their perspectives weren't different enough that like when you were reading you didn't know like who was talking. Like I know in different books that have multiple perspectives, usually it's clear enough that when you're reading it you're like, okay, like I know this is so and so compared to the other, you know, point of view. But in this book it was Jack and Fleur's like thoughts and actions and feelings were so similar that it was very difficult to, unless you were for sure paying attention to like who was reading or like the name that appeared before like each section, unless you paid attention to that, it was very difficult to determine which, you know, who was who. Was it Jack? Was it Fleur? Whoever. Also, I thought Julio and Amber also should have gotten their own point of views because in my perspective, they were way more interesting than Jack and Fleur. Jack and Fleur were very wishy-washy characters. They were very like, oh, I'm in love, but like, I don't know if I can be with you because like, it feels weird that like these decisions aren't ours, which I'll get to. Like they always switched back and forth between like, you know, I'm brave, but I don't know myself. But I'm brave, but like I don't want to hurt other people. And it was very like it was so back and forth. And I get like, you know, creating inner conflict, like that makes the characters more interesting, but it was so much like inner conflict of like, I just want to protect her, I just want to protect him, but also like, are these thoughts really mine? So the reason for that, by the way, is because come to find out in the story, which this is a spoiler, Gaia's lover, who's Lion, his name's, you know, Daniel Lion, who used to be a Winter, but then like he was in love with Gaia and Kronos wasn't for that, so Kronos was like, I'm going to take away your powers and you're going to be mortal, but you're going to be stuck like training all the Winters. He ends up like, he and Gaia like hatch a plan to like find seasons who would purposely fall in love with each other and want to break out of the cycles so that they could like take down Kronos, which is like a big, obviously very big spoiler, very big part of the plot. So Jack kind of finds out that like his feeling, he's like, well, are my feelings for Fleur really like my feelings, or is it like just because they put us together and like wanted us to fall in love? So that was like a big conflict, which again, I understand why he would feel that way, but at the same time it was so much of it that it was like very, it got so repetitive. Another issue I had was that Jack and Fleur's relationship, when I first read the premise, I thought it was going to be like the enemies to lovers trope, which, you know, is a trope, of course. There's always tropes, no matter what book you read. There's always going to be some kind of trope. But it's like one of my favorites, and I was like, oh, so maybe it'll be like an enemies to lovers story where like Jack and Fleur are obviously enemies. They're supposed to be like Fleur's supposed to kill Jack so that Spring can take over, but they end up falling in love with each other. So the story starts with them already establishing a relationship. Like they're already in love with each other. We already know that. So we don't get to see them fall in love. We kind of just like, you know, are told like, oh yeah, they already really dig each other, even though they like don't really interact all that much except when she's trying to kill him. So they only interact for like a really short time. So we don't really get to see like them falling for each other, and then we're just told that they already are in love with each other, and like most of the book is just like their relationship progressing to being like, oh, well, he likes me and I like him and we're supposed to do this because like our love, you know, is greater than anything else, and you know, we need to rebel against the observatory and Kronos, and our love can conquer all, like that kind of stuff. And it was very cheesy. Their love story was very not believable, in my opinion. Personally, and I think it's because like their, like I said, their perspectives are so similar to each other that we don't really get a very clear separation between Jack and Fleur, in my opinion. So when I like couldn't understand like what there was about Jack that like was so dreamy to Fleur, and then like you know, same thing. Like, I didn't understand what about Fleur was like making Jack be like, I have to, you know, get out of the observatory and we have to escape and we have to run away together and I have to protect her at all costs and blah, 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 blah. Sure, like, Fleur had like really cool powers, and she ended up being like a strong character, but I just didn't understand like what made them so like special to each other. So another spoiler, Julio and Amber, on the other hand, also end up falling in love with each other, but their love story is much more believable. I personally thought, like, if I had to like rewrite this story, which I will never, obviously, it would be in Amber's perspective. I think Amber was the strongest character in terms of like her inner conflict and just her abilities and like the way she was around other people. She had a very hard exterior, but then like you knew that she cared about certain people, and she ended up coming around a lot, and I thought she was like just super kick-ass. Like, she was able to like, you know, conjure fire and stuff like that, so I thought she was a very strong character and I would have loved a book in her perspective. I also really did like Julio. Julio was a lot more of a, I don't want to say dreamier, but I'm going to say it. He was a lot more of a dreamier character than Jack was, in my opinion. I thought he had, a stronger inner conflict with like how he died and like what happened to him, and his relationship with Amber and like his relationship with Fleur also is very interesting. I definitely thought they should have at least had perspectives. If not, Amber should have just narrated the whole story. Another thing that bothered me about this story was that the magic system was not well explained. We got some hints throughout the story here and there of like what they could control. Like, Fleur could control trees and roots and, you know, make earthquakes happen, and Jack could freeze water and, you know, his eyes would turn white with like frost, and like frost would, you know, drip over him. Julio could, you know, control waves and make it rain, and then obviously I said Amber could like control fire. But we didn't really get a very clear portrayal of like when they were in, like when somebody was in the season, what they could do. Like, could winter not happen if like Jack wasn't out there in that region? Obviously, because there's like hundreds of, you know, kids embodied as seasons, like each person took over a certain region. So like if Jack wasn't in the east of the United States, would, you know, the east not have winter, or was he just like, when winter came, was he just like amplified? Like, there was no clear explanation as to what each season could do, or like what they were supposed to do when they were in season. All you really got from them was like when it was winter, a winter was stronger, and then when it was like fall, a winter would be weaker. Or if they were in like a colder climate, they would be at their strongest, whereas like if a summer was in a warmer climate, they would be at their strongest. So there wasn't really a clear portrayal or explanation of like what the magic system was. I also thought that the side characters, so other than Amber and Julio, they're, you know, main characters, even though they didn't get a POV. The side characters, so each season had a handler who would like, so when the season was out, like trying to fight the previous season, they would be speaking to their handlers who were like down in the observatories, which were also kids that were about to die or were like on, you know, a couple minutes in death, and they were like saved or chosen by one of the seasons. So like Jack's handler forever is Chill, and he like saved him from drowning in a lake that was like frozen over at the boarding school that he had attended prior to becoming a season. So the handlers would like, you know, talk to them on the other end and like, you know, look for the previous season on a map. So the side characters, some are okay, and then some were just like cheesy. I should say like Lion as a character, his advice that he gave Jack was so cheesy. And like just very generic, like I'm the, you know, classic adults, like I know more than I'm initially letting on, and like I technically picked you to be like my protege, so I'm gonna give you like this, you know, generic standard advice. So I found him to be really cheesy. I guess the handlers were okay, but they didn't go into enough depth about them that like you really cared about them as characters. And like their relationships to the person that, or the relationships to the season that they were working with. The only exception would be Woody, who was Amber's handler. Like you kind of got a feel for their relationship a little bit. And like Jack and Chills and Poppy and Fleur's relationship was a little bit more established, but like not enough that you made me like, there's a point in the story where like the handlers have to leave so that they can stay safe, because throughout the story, the 4 seasons are constantly under attack. Like they can't go a chapter without being under attack by somebody, which also gets excessive very quick. The handlers like just like have to leave, and they're gone for like less than a week. But like when they reappear in the story, you're kind of like, oh yeah, I forgot they were characters. Like they're still here. So I don't know. I personally felt like I just didn't care enough about any of the characters in this book. With the exception of like Amber, I would have loved to see more of her and like her perspective on things that were happening, because I felt like she was probably the strongest character out of the 4. So anyway, to make a long story short, this book just wasn't my favorite. I thought there was a lot that could have been better in terms of like execution of the concept. It also just felt way too long. Like the book's almost 500 pages long, and it also like wrapped up very neatly, but I guess there's going to be a sequel, so I don't really understand, like based off of the ending of the story, which I guess I won't give that away. But all I'm going to say is it was wrapped up very neatly, but apparently there's going to be a sequel, so I don't know what else she's going to do with the story. But I mean, I'll still read it. I'll still read the sequel to see like where the characters go and end up. Maybe like more of the main characters will get a perspective, which would be really cool. But yeah, it wasn't my favorite. I will say that some of the scenes in the book are really fun. There's a bar scene that the characters wind up in that's really funny, mainly for what happens with Amber and Julio. So those are cool. I thought like the beginning of the story was really strong, which again, if the book had to be rewritten, I would say that there should be more time spent on how the seasons like, you know, got to be where they were. Like got to be seasons. All we really get to see is Jack and how Jack became a season, but like, you know, he dies in the beginning of the story, and then there's like a 30-year time jump where he's already been a season established for 30 years, and again, his relationship with Fleur has already been established. So I would like to see, like, if the book had to be rewritten, how the seasons came to be, and like how Fleur and Jack established that relationship and how they kind of fell in love with each other. And then like the point of the book, which is, you know, the first part of the book where they like escape the observatory, I think all of that would have been a really good first book, and then like what happens from the middle to the end of the story would make for a really strong sequel. But because like there was so much missing from the first part of the book where we don't really get to see how the characters came to be and like how their relationships were established, I felt like that was kind of, there was like a disconnect there, and then like you found yourself not really caring about the characters throughout the rest of the story, at least in my opinion. Again, I thought the book was very well written in terms of prose, in terms of like the concept, and I thought the ending was really interesting. Again, I thought it wrapped up neatly, but I thought like there were some things I didn't really see coming towards the end, which was good. That's always good in a story where you're kind of thrown off and can't really guess the ending. So that was good. In terms of like me personally, it just wasn't my favorite. But I know how hard it is to write a book, and you know, I don't discredit anything that Elle Cosimano has done. I haven't read any more books by her. I definitely am going to be on the lookout for, you know, more of her work. But yeah, other than that, not my favorite, not terrible, kind of just in the middle. I definitely rambled way too much in this video, but if you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more book reviews, for more bookish unboxings. I might throw in a vlog and a makeup tutorial here and there, but anyway, thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you like what you see, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.